The Bible tells us that we should walk with God. The Bible tells us Enoch walked with God and was not because God took him. It's sort of like an Old Testament version of the rapture. Enoch and the Lord would take a walk with the Lord every day. And maybe one day the Lord said, hey, buddy, we're closer to my house than yours. Why don't you come home with me? But he went to be with the Lord. But here's my question for you. Are you walking with God? What does it mean to walk with God? It means to stay in rhythm with God, to move at the same pace that God moves. Don't run ahead of him. Don't lag behind him. Walk with God. Amos says this, can two walk together unless they be agreed? And that phrase, be agreed, means unless they keep their appointment. Listen, you can make an appointment every day, especially in the morning, to meet with God and to walk with God and stay in sync with him. Many years ago, I was in Maui and we went scuba diving. And we were going to dive off of an island called Molokini. It's a 100-foot deep dive. That's pretty deep. And so we got on the boat and we began to descend to the bottom. And I had a lot of anxiety and I'd never gone that deep before. And my friend looked and said, you had so many bubbles coming out of your tank. I was just like breathing really hard. And literally by the time I got to the bottom, I'd used up almost all of my air. So I had an instructor nearby and I swam over to him and I made this motion, which means I'm losing air. He looks at my gauge and realizes how low my air is. I could literally see him roll his eyes even behind his mask, like, what an idiot. And so he gestures, and on the back of his tank was an octopus, not a literal octopus, but a shorter hose on another regulator. That's what you breathe out of, gesturing to me, breathe out of my tank. He had two tanks. So I grabbed the regulator attached to the short hose, and I began to go with him. See, wherever he went, I had to go. If he went up, I went up. But because the hose was so short, I had to do real shallow strokes. It was a little humiliating. And the rest of the dive, I had to stay in sync with my diving instructor. Why? Because if I did not, I would die. I would drown. That's the idea here. Stay in sync with God. Do what God tells you to do. Go where God tells you to go. And walk with God each and every day. Enoch was a last days believer, so to speak. He was living in the end times before the flood. We are last days believers today. Let's walk with God as we await the return of Jesus Christ.